My mother smiled at my sister and said, "Take the ring. He was always too good for her anyway." She said it while I was still standing in the doorway. My fiancé was still in the room when she said it. I thought that was the worst betrayal of my life. I was wrong. My name is Claire. I'm 32 now. My sister Sadie is 29. Growing up, Sadie was the center of our house, our holidays, and honestly, every conversation we ever had. When Sadie laughed, everybody laughed louder. When Sadie cried, the whole house changed shape. When I cried, my mother asked me to calm down. That was our normal. My mother called Sadie her sunshine girl. She called me her steady girl. That sounds kind when you hear it once. It is not kind after 20 years. Sunshine girl got softness. Steady girl got responsibility. Sunshine girl got rescue. Steady girl got expectations. If Sadie forgot her homework, my mother said she was overwhelmed. If I forgot mine, my mother said I was careless. If Sadie spent too much money, my father said young people make mistakes. If I bought one thing for myself, my mother asked if I was trying to be reckless. My father was quieter, but he was not better. He hated conflict more than unfairness. That matters later. When I was 9, Sadie took the birthday money our aunt mailed me and bought a glitter purse at the mall. I found the torn card in the trash. My mother said sisters share. When I was 12, Sadie ruined the bracelet my grandmother gave me and cried so hard my mother grounded me for upsetting her. When I was 15, Sadie flirted with a boy I liked at a summer picnic, then told everyone I was jealous and dramatic. People laughed. I laughed too. That was the danger. You learn to laugh before your own pain can stand up. By high school, I had one rule. Do not react in public if I cried. Sadie looked innocent. If I got angry, my mother looked tired. If I stayed quiet, people called me mature. What they meant was convenient. The only person who saw it clearly was my grandmother, my mom's mother. Her name was Ruth, but everyone called her Nana Ruth. She lived in a greenhouse with a deep porch and wind chimes that never stopped moving. Her house smelled like coffee, soap, cinnamon, and paper. When I was little, I spent Saturdays there helping her trim roses and sort old recipes into boxes. She watched people carefully. One afternoon when I was 16, Sadie had just thrown a fit because my mother would not buy her concert tickets. 20 minutes later, my mother bought them online anyway. I was at Nana Ruth's table peeling apples too hard. She looked at my hands and said, "You're skinning fruit like it insulted your family." I laughed. Then I cried. I told her I hated the person I became around my own house. She set down the knife and said, "No, sweetheart, you hate the role they keep handing you." I never forgot that. The role they keep handing you. That was exactly it. In my family, I was always handed a role. Calm one, reliable one, forgiving one, flexible one. The person who gave up her time, her plans, her place, and then smiled so everybody else could stay comfortable. Nana Ruth saw me. My mother hated that she did. If Nana praised my grades, my mother said Sadie was more social. If Nana praised my work ethic, my mother said Sadie had more spirit. Praise in our family worked like a seesaw. If I went up, somebody rushed to lift Sadie higher. I left for college at 18 and nearly did not come back. I got a scholarship 3 hours away. It was the first place where no one knew my assigned role. I studied operations and finance because I liked systems, schedules, and things that made sense. Numbers do not gaslight you. I worked nights at a hotel front desk and learned how to survive on bad coffee and 4 hours of sleep. I loved it. For the first time, nobody entered my room without knocking. Nobody told my stories for me. Nobody asked me to shrink so someone else could feel bigger. That was also where I met Ethan. He was not flashy. He was not loud. He had tired eyes, a kind smile, and a habit of listening all the way to the end of my sentences. The first time we studied together, I talked for 10 straight minutes about a broken inventory project at work. When I finished, he smiled and said, "You always solve the thing underneath the thing, don't you?" No one had ever noticed me kindly like that before. We dated for 4 years. Not perfect years. Real ones, cheap takeout, secondhand furniture, long drives, bills we split down the middle, arguments about dishes and job stress and where we might live after graduation. Real life. That is how I knew it was real. Then I made my mistake. I brought him home too often. The first Christmas he spent with my family, Sadie smiled too brightly. She asked endless questions. What kind of girls had he dated before me? Was he always this quiet? Did he ever get bored of serious people? Everyone laughed. Even Ethan smiled politely. Under the table, my hands shook. I knew that tone. Sadie was not curious. She was circling. After that, little things started happening. Ethan brought up childhood stories I had never told him, private stories, embarrassing ones. The time I threw up before a school recital, the time my mother made me wear one of Sadie's old dresses to a church dinner because nobody would notice the fit. When I asked how he knew those things, he said Sadie told him. I asked her to stop. She laughed and said, "Relax, I'm helping him understand you." Helping him understand you. That phrase sat in my chest like poison. Then Ethan started canceling plans because Sadie needed advice. Advice about jobs, advice about an ex, advice about apartments, always something. I told myself I was being paranoid. That word had been planted deep in me by then. Paranoid, difficult, too sensitive. It kept me from naming the truth until it had already settled in. 2 months after graduation, Ethan sat me down outside my apartment and said he needed space. My stomach dropped before the rest arrived. Space is never just space, he said. He felt overwhelmed. He said I carried too much stress. He said he needed to figure out who he was. All soft words, all tidy words. Words designed to make betrayal sound thoughtful. 3 weeks later, my friend Mallory sent me a screenshot. Sadie and Ethan were at a rooftop bar together. I stared at the photo so long my phone went dark. Then my mother called and said, "Before you hear it from the wrong person, Sadie and Ethan have really connected." Connected, that was the word. Not betrayed, not crossed a line, connected. I hung up on her. It was the first time I had ever done that. It felt like swallowing fire. After that, I kept my distance. For almost a year, I spoke to my parents only when necessary, and to Sadie, not at all. I still called Nana Ruth. Then Nana got sick. It started small, a fall in the kitchen, then dizziness, then tests. Then the careful voice doctors use when a room is about to split open. Heart failure, manageable at first, then less manageable. I moved back for what I thought would be a few months. It turned into almost 18 months. I do not regret one day. Nana's greenhouse became the safest place I had ever lived. I handled appointments, medication, bills, groceries, insurance calls, and the endless tiny tasks illness creates. I worked remotely from her dining room table and learned how to survive on fear and lists. My mother came by when other people were present. Sadie came twice in the first month, once to complain that the house smelled old, once to ask whether Nana planned to simplify the estate. That sentence told me everything. Later that night, Nana looked at me over her tea and said, "Your sister walks into every room like she's already spending it." I laughed so hard I cried. At that point, I thought the biggest fight ahead would be emotional. I was wrong. One rainy afternoon, Nana asked me to bring the blue file box from the hall closet. I thought she wanted insurance papers. She wanted more than that. Inside the box were deeds, account summaries, trust documents, and handwritten notes. Her lawyer came the next day, a sharp woman named Denise Hall, with silver hair and a voice that made people stop lying. That was when I learned the truth. Nana was leaving me the greenhouse. She was also leaving me the downtown flower shop building she and my grandfather had rented out for years. A narrow brick storefront on Main Street that still had the old painted sign under newer paint. I knew she owned it. I did not know it was fully paid off and worth far more than anyone guessed. I stared at the papers until the words blurred. Then I asked the only thing that mattered. Why me? Nana looked annoyed. Because you show up, she said. That sentence hit me so hard I had to look down. Because you show up. No one in my family had ever rewarded that before. They had only used it. I told Denise Hall I did not want anyone saying I had influenced Nana. She said, "Good thing the law does not depend on your relatives being reasonable." I wish that had been the end. It wasn't. A month later, my mother found out there had been updates. Not from me, from Sadie. And Sadie found out because she had gone through Nana's desk while pretending to look for stamps. She was never looking for what she said she was looking for. That Sunday, my mother arrived at the house with Sadie and Ethan. Yes, Ethan was still around, not in a dramatic way, in a boring, disappointing one that almost made it worse. My mother brought a pie she did not bake. Sadie wore cream cashmere in fake concern. Ethan carried flowers and looked uncomfortable enough that for 1 weak second I almost pitied him. Then I remembered the rooftop bar. The kitchen felt wrong the second they sat down. Too bright, too polite, the kind of polite that hides knives. At first there was small talk, then my mother set down her fork and said, "We hear there may be updates to some paperwork." Nana did not blink. "We?" she asked. Sadie smiled and said, "Mom just means the family." Nana took a sip of tea. "The family did not earn my house," she said. "I did." The room changed right then. My mother's smile tightened. She said she only wanted fairness. Fairness. That almost made me laugh. Fairness had never mattered when Sadie took my money, my stories, my boyfriend, or my peace. Then Sadie started listing reasons she would be better suited for the flower shop building. She understood style. She had better local connections. She knew branding. I just sat there stunned by the nerve of hearing my whole life reduced again in front of me. Nana let her talk. Then she turned to Ethan and asked, "And what do you think?" He froze. Then he said, "I think families should share opportunities." Share opportunities. The man who had helped Sadie betray me was now speaking like a consultant at my funeral. My hands shook under the table. I started to speak, but Nana beat me to it. "No," she said. "Just that, no." Sadie laughed like she thought it was a joke. Nana did not laugh back then. She said, "Claire has invested time, labor, and love. Sadie has invested curiosity and entitlement. Those are not equal." No one spoke after that. My mother left early, taking the pie with her. On the drive home, she accidentally left me a voicemail. I heard her tell my father, "She always sits there calm and makes everybody else look cruel." That line stayed with me. I had spent years trying not to be difficult, and somehow even my silence accused her. After that dinner, Everything turned colder. My mother stopped asking how Nana felt. She asked whether Denise Hall had visited again. Sadie started posting fake sweet things online, old childhood photos, captions about sisterhood, heart emojis people commented with warmth. I wanted to throw my phone into a river. Then Sadie started dropping by the house more often, always with pastries she did not buy, always too loud, always performing concern. One afternoon I came in from the garden and heard her telling Nana, "I just worry Claire takes on too much. She gets controlling when she's stressed." I froze in the doorway. Sadie turned and smiled like she had not just cut me open. Nana did not miss a beat. She said, "If Claire controls anything here, it is because someone else keeps trying to steal the wheel." I almost laughed. Sadie did not stay long. A few months later, Nana took a bad turn. Hospital oxygen, night nurses, more pills, more fear. I spent more nights in a vinyl chair than in a bed that winter. My mother came twice and complained about parking both times. Sadie came once, took a selfie while Nana slept and called the hospital lighting tragic. I made her delete it. She rolled her eyes and said I was impossible. That winter, Nana got serious about paperwork. Denise Hall came twice more. The second time she asked me to take notes. That was when I learned the full truth. Not only was I getting the house and the storefront, Nana had also assigned most of her liquid savings to me with smaller gifts to others, not because she was cruel, because, as she put it, "I know who will keep things standing." I tried to tell her she did not need to explain herself. She gave me a look. "Claire, stop apologizing for being chosen by someone who actually knows you." I wrote that line down later so I would not forget it. Stop apologizing for being chosen. Nana died in March. There is no elegant way to write that. One day she was there. The next day the house sounded wrong. Too quiet. I remember the refrigerator hum, the spoon in the sink, her reading glasses folded beside a half-finished crossword. I remember standing in her room holding one of her cardigans to my face because I could not stop shaking. Grief came like static. Everything looked normal and felt ruined. The funeral was small. I wanted it that way. No giant arrangements, no dramatic music, just the people who had actually loved her. Then came the reading of the will. That was where the real war began. It happened in Denise Hall's office 2 days later. My mother wore navy in false sadness. Sadie looked bored until numbers were mentioned. Then she sat up. Ethan came too, which shocked me until I realized he thought he belonged in all of it somehow. Denise Hall read slowly. Specific gifts first, then the house, then the storefront, then the accounts. My name came up again and again. By the third time, Sadie's face had changed. By the fourth, my mother had gone flat. By the fifth, Ethan would not look at me. When Denise finished, there was silence for a full 5 seconds. Then Sadie laughed once and said, "That can't be right." Denise folded her hands and said, "It is right." My mother leaned forward. "There must be confusion," she said. Claire was living there while Ruth was vulnerable. Vulnerable like I had tricked a woman who once balanced rental income, church donations, and 3 garden club budgets without blinking. My hands shook under the table. Denise Hall's voice turned to steel. "Ruth made these decisions over time," she said. "There's no question of capacity." Then Sadie said the thing I should have expected. "So the reward for playing nurse is getting everything." I turned to her so fast my chair scraped. I said very quietly, "You took selfies in her hospital room." For once, Sadie had no answer. My mother did. She said, "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Claire always turns things ugly." That sentence again. Different day, same machine. I stood up because if I stayed seated, I was going to scream. Denise asked if anyone needed a break. No one took one. Instead, my mother started asking legal questions. Could the estate be reviewed? Could the storefront be delayed? Could the house be sold first? Denise answered calmly. Every answer was some version of no in the parking lot. After Sadie stepped close and hissed, "Enjoy it while it lasts." I should have paid more attention to that sentence, because 3 days later someone got into Nana's house. Nothing huge was taken, a lockbox, some copied files, one folder with account summaries. At first I thought it might be random. Then I noticed which drawers were open. The ones with the estate copies, my whole body went cold. The sheriff came. He asked who had keys. I said me, my mother, Sadie, the cleaning lady. That was all. He asked if I suspected anyone. I froze. I wanted to say yes. Saying it out loud felt like crossing some final line, so I said I don't know. That was true in the weakest possible way. That same night, I changed the locks and installed cameras. One outside the front porch, one by the back gate, one in the hall facing the desk. Good thing I did, because a week later, the back camera caught someone trying the side door after midnight. Dark hoodie, fast hands, but the walk was familiar, the impatient shoulder jerk. The way he checked behind him before pulling harder. Ethan, not Sadie, not my mother, Ethan. I watched the clip 6 times, then a 7th. Proof feels strange when you have spent years being trained to doubt your own eyes. The sheriff took a copy. Nothing dramatic happened immediately. Apparently, one failed attempt does not move mountains. But it mattered to me, because from that moment on, they could never make me feel crazy again. Around then, a man named Jonah started mattering in my life. At first, he was just the contractor Denise Hall recommended to inspect the storefront roof because it needed work. He was quiet, practical, and allergic to fake charm. He did not talk down to me. He did not act surprised that I understood repair budgets and lease terms. He told the truth plainly. That stood out more than it should have. We spent weeks discussing estimates, permits, and timing, then months turning the building into something useful again. Somewhere in that work, trust grew. Not theatrically, not suddenly. Quietly. That kind lasts longer. Meanwhile, my family escalated. An anonymous post appeared in a neighborhood Facebook group saying I had isolated an elderly relative for financial gain. The wording was careful. Almost legal. That scared me more than open cruelty would have. People commented exactly the way people always do when gossip offers them a moral costume. If true, that's disgusting. Money changes people. Poor family. My hands shook while I read it. Then Denise Hall called and told me not to respond publicly. She came by with printed screenshots and a legal pad. She read the post twice. Then she tapped one line. Only a family member would know this detail, she said. The detail was about an argument in a hospital hallway where my mother complained about parking and vending machines. No one else had been there. I screenshotted everything and added it to a growing folder labeled Noise. That folder got thick fast, because 2 weeks later, Sadie called Jonah from a blocked number. He only answered because he was expecting a roofing supplier. He put it on speaker the second he realized. Her voice went sugary immediately. She said she wanted to clear the air. She said she worried I was unstable from grief. She said maybe they should meet for coffee because I sometimes hear what she wants to hear. My face went hot. Jonah looked at me, then said calmly, "Do not call this number again." She laughed and said, "Wow, she got to you fast." He hung up. I was shaking so hard I had to sit down. Jonah knelt beside me and said, "She wants you to react without thinking." He was right. That was Sadie's whole game. Push, smile, wait, then frame the reaction as proof. So I got quieter. Not softer, sharper. The storefront became my next project. It had good bones and a bad roof, old wood floors, dusty shelves, a narrow back room that smelled like paper and time. The first time I unlocked it alone after the funeral, I cried. I could see possibility all over it. Light in the windows, a small studio, a flower workshop, a place that belonged to me. Jonah took one look and said, "This place has a future if people stop trying to steal it from the present." That line stayed with me. For the first time in years, the future felt larger than endurance. So of course my family tried harder. When word spread that I was planning to keep the storefront instead of selling it, my mother started telling relatives I was selfish. Sadie told people I was in over my head. This was funny because Sadie once got her debit card frozen twice in 1 month from impulse shopping and still called herself a lifestyle consultant. Facts never slow people like her down. Then my cousin Ian told me something useful. He said Sadie had been bragging at a bar that she was getting the building in the end anyway. I asked what that meant. He shrugged and said she did not explain. My stomach dropped. I doubled the camera storage and changed the locks again. 2 nights later, the inside hall camera caught Sadie in Nana's house while I was out meeting with Denise Hall. She had used a copied key. She went straight to the desk, straight to the file drawer, not wandering, not confused. Purposeful. The sheriff took that footage too. Now there was no pretending. Not even for me around then. Jonah and I crossed the line from trust into something warmer. Again, not in a dramatic way, no rooftop confession, no airport scene. One night after reviewing contractor bids, we sat on the empty storefront floor eating takeout from cartons. He looked at me and said, "You know, you don't have to earn basic decency anymore, right?" I started crying before I could stop myself. That was when I knew people think love arrives as fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as a sentence your nervous system has never been allowed to hear. A few months later, he proposed. Not in public, not at a restaurant. In the empty shop on a rainy Sunday while water tapped the windows and dust turned silver in the light. He held out the ring and said, "I don't want to rescue you. I want to build something honest with you." I laughed and cried at the same time. Then I said yes. For 24 hours I told nobody except my friend Mallory. I wanted one clean day. Then my mother saw the ring at the grocery store by dinner. Half the family knew. By the next morning, Sadie texted me for the first time in weeks. "Guess, someone really will marry anything with property." I stared at the message and felt almost nothing. That scared me more than anger because it meant something had died. Not hope, not love, just the need for her approval. A few days later, my mother called and said we had to fix things before the wedding. I asked what needed fixing. She said, "The family cannot go into something this big, divided, as if I had built the wall alone." She wanted lunch downtown, public place, neutral ground. I agreed because by then I was done hiding. That lunch became one of the strangest hours of my life. My mother arrived first wearing pearls and sorrow. Sadie arrived late in sunglasses. Ethan came too because apparently bad decisions travel in pairs. For 20 minutes my mother spoke in circles. Healing, stress, misunderstanding, family strain. Then finally she said it. She wanted Sadie to be my maid of honor. I just stared at her. Then she added, And maybe you could let her wear your spare ceremony dress. It suits her coloring better anyway. I laughed once, sharp and wrong. Sadie took off her sunglasses and said, "You don't have to be rude." Rude, that word again. I asked why they thought any of this was possible. My mother said because appearances matter. There it was, not repair, not love appearances. She wanted photos that lied. I said no. Sadie said I was punishing everyone for old history. I looked right at her and said forgery and trespassing are not old history. The table went quiet. For once, Ethan said nothing. Maybe cowardice had finally run out of phrases. I paid my part of the bill and left. That night I made the final decision. My mother, Sadie, and Ethan were not invited to the wedding. I told Jonah first, then Mallory. Then I sent Denise Hall a copy of the guest list change because by then my life had become partially legal administration. A week later, invitations went out. 2 days after that, the last act began. Sadie posted a crying selfie online with the caption, "Losing your grandmother and your sister in the same year changes you forever." People flooded the comments with sympathy. My mother commented a broken heart. An aunt wrote, "Family is everything." I nearly threw my phone into the sink. Mallory took it from me and said, "Do not bleed for free." That helped. Then Sadie escalated. She started messaging relatives privately saying I had become paranoid since Nana died. She implied Jonah was isolating me. She told one cousin I was threatening lawsuits over simple questions. That cousin sent me screenshots because, thank God, she loves drama but loves receipts more. I added them to the folder. Then the real twist landed. Denise Hall called one Friday afternoon and asked if I was sitting down. I was not. I sat. She said somebody had submitted a typed statement claiming Nana wanted to amend the will shortly before her death. My vision narrowed. What statement? From whom? Denise could not tell me everything yet, but she said it was clearly suspicious and not properly executed. Still, it existed. That meant someone had moved from gossip into fabrication. My first thought was Sadie. My second thought was my mother helped. My third thought was that I had been stupid to think this would stop at social pressure. I went cold all over, then angry. Not hot anger, clear anger, the kind that sharpens. Denise said, we needed hospital records, witness timelines, and patience. Patience. I had spent my whole life being patient. This time, patience would be a blade, not a cage, so I used it. I dug through calendars, invoices, texts, hospital records, and old emails. Jonah helped me sort folders. Denise built a timeline. Mallory supplied coffee and sarcasm. The more we built it, the stronger it got. On the date the fake amendment claimed Nana wanted changes, she had not been alone with my mother or Sadie at all. She had been in imaging, then under observation, then with 2 nurses and me. No gap, no chance. Then something even dumber surfaced. One of the listed witnesses on the typed statement was a notary who had retired to Florida 2 years earlier. When Denise told me that, I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny. Because it was so arrogant, so sloppy, so certain that no one would check. Denise said very carefully, "This is moving beyond a family dispute." I knew what she meant. Fraud, forgery. Those words sat in my stomach like stones. A month before the wedding, my mother showed up at Nana's house alone. I almost did not let her in. She looked tired. Smaller. For one stupid second, some old part of me thought maybe this was the moment. Maybe she had finally come to tell the truth. Instead, she stood in the kitchen and said, "I need you to stop this before Sadie loses everything." There it was. Not remorse, not honesty, fear for Sadie, always back to Sadie. I asked if she knew about the fake amendment. She said nothing for too long. Then she whispered, "You know how desperate grief makes people?" That was not an answer. I asked again. She sat down and said, "If you would just split the storefront, none of this would be necessary." None of this necessary. There it was, clean, unhidden. A confession shaped like a request. I felt something inside me settle. Not peace, certainty, I said. "Leave." She stared at me. Maybe because I had never spoken to her that plainly before. At the door, she said, "Families survive by forgiving." I said, "Some families survive by feeding one person to the rest." She had no answer. She left. The wedding was at the storefront. Small, honest, warm lights, wood tables, no church politics, no fake softness, just the people who had earned the right to witness joy. The morning was calm. Too calm. Mallory zipped my dress upstairs while Jonah's sister fixed my hair. For 1 full hour, I felt peaceful. Then Mallory looked out the window and said very carefully, "Claire, your family is here?" My stomach dropped. Then she added, "And Sadie is wearing white." Of course she was. Of course I walked to the window and looked down. My mother stood in pale blue, as if she had never heard a boundary in her life. Sadie stood beside her in white silk, holding her phone like she expected a documentary crew. Ethan stood behind them looking like a man who regretted every path that brought him there and still lacked the courage to walk away. My hand started shaking. Mallory touched my shoulder and said, "You do not have to go down there." But I did. Not alone. Jonah came with me. So did Denise Hall at the entrance. My mother was arguing with the planner. Sadie saw me and switched on tears instantly. "That speed still amazes me," she said loudly. "I just wanted to fix this before your big day. A stage, always a stage. My mother stepped forward and said, "Please don't do this in front of everyone." "Do what? Exist? Honestly?" I said. "You were not invited." Sadie cried harder. Then she delivered the line she had clearly rehearsed. "I know you hate me, but I can't lose my sister too." Guests had started gathering near the front room. I could feel eyes on me. Old panic rose. The old instinct said, "Keep it quiet, make it small, do not embarrass the family." Then I looked at Jonah, then Mallory, then Denise. Then I looked through the doorway at the room. Nana would have loved and the life I had built from the pieces they kept trying to take, and something inside me clicked into place. Not rage, clarity. I said, loud enough for the entrance and half the room to hear, "You stole from me for years, tried to steal Nana's estate, broke into her house, filed false statements, harassed my fiancé, and kept pushing because you thought I'd split everything to buy silence. Leave silence. Real silence." Sadie's tears stopped for half a second. My mother went white. Then she recovered and said, "How dare you make accusations like that here?" Denise stepped forward before I could answer. She said, calm as winter, "She dares because there is evidence." That changed the air. Sadie lowered her phone a little. My mother looked around and realized the audience was not automatically hers. Then Sadie did what she always did when cornered. She attacked. She pointed at me and shouted, "You always thought you were better than us. Nana only left you things because you manipulated her when she was dying." Old pain hit first. Then something stronger rose behind it. Not shame, not this time. Truth, I said. Nana trusted me because I showed up. You showed up for paperwork and selfies. A sound moved through the guests behind me. Not quite a gasp, more like understanding. Then, in full panic, Sadie made the biggest mistake of her life. She shouted, "If you just split it, none of this would have happened." There it was, public, clean, unhidden, a confession shaped like a complaint. I watched the understanding move across faces around us. My mother closed her eyes for 1 second. Ethan whispered, "Sadie, too late. Way too late." Then my father did something unexpected. Yes, he was alive in this story. He had not come earlier because he always chose absence when truth was expensive. He had stayed in the car, but now he came inside. He stepped through the door and said, "Stop, not soft, not tired." Sharp, everybody froze. He looked at Sadie and said, louder, "Stop lying, stop blaming her, stop all of it. I forgot to breathe." He turned to my mother and said, "You taught her this and I let it happen." I had never heard him speak that honestly in my life. My mother looked furious and frightened all at once. She said, "This is not the place." He said, "No, this is exactly the place because you used every other one." Then he faced me in front of everybody and said, "I'm sorry." Just that, no excuse, no speech, no softener. I did not forgive him in that second. Life is not that neat, but I believed him, and that mattered. The planner opened the door wide and said, "They need to leave now." 2 of Jonah's friends stepped closer too. Not threatening, just solid present. My mother grabbed Sadie's arm. This time, Sadie let herself be pulled at the door. She turned back and said, "This isn't over." And for the first time in my life, I smiled at her without fear. I said, "Yes, it is." She left. They all did. The entrance stayed quiet for 1 long beat. Then Mallory clapped once and said, "Okay, great, let's get married." Everyone laughed, real laughter, the kind that releases pressure instead of hiding it. I laughed too, though tears were on my face. Then I married Jonah in the storefront. Nana trusted me to keep standing. It was the happiest day of my life, not because it was perfect, because it was true. After the wedding, things moved quickly. The fake statement, break-in footage, copied key issue, text trail, screenshots, and public outburst stopped looking like family drama and started looking like what they were: fraud, harassment, unlawful entry. I'm keeping that part simple. What matters is that paper trails matter, screenshots matter, voicemails matter, truth likes records. My mother somehow stayed out of the worst consequences through careful denials and expensive counsel. Sadie did not. Actions look ugly in black and white, especially your own words. The gossip flipped exactly the way gossip always does when facts arrive. People who had quietly believed I was cold suddenly had kind things to say. I did not need them to. That was new. Not needing the late rescue. My father started therapy again. I'm not writing a fairy tale. He did not become brave overnight, but he started telling the truth in smaller rooms. Once, months later, while helping me repaint the back office, he said, "I spent years thinking quiet made me decent. I think it just made me useful to the loudest person in the room." I said, "Yeah." We stood there with paint on our hands and let that be enough. The storefront opened that fall. We turned it into a flower studio with a tiny cafe corner in front. We called it Ruth and Stem on opening morning. I unlocked the door before sunrise and stood alone in the dark for 1 minute. The air smelled like paint, coffee, damp brick, and possibility. My hands shook a little when I switched on the lights. Not from fear, from awe. People came. Then more people came. Then the line reached the sidewalk. Mallory cried into a muffin. Jonah burned the first tray of pastries and pretended it was intentional. My father arrived at noon carrying a small rosemary plant. He held it out and said, "She always kept one by the back steps." I took it. We looked at the plant instead of each other. Then I said, "Thanks, Dad, that was enough." Sometimes healing is not a speech. Sometimes it is a plant, a doorway, and two people trying not to waste a second chance. A year has passed now. I'm writing this upstairs while the afternoon crowd hums below me. There's flour on my sleeve. There's coffee on my desk. There's a framed photo near the window of Jonah and me, smiling in a way my younger self would not recognize. Every now and then someone asks if I regret exposing everything so publicly at the wedding. No, I regret that it became necessary. I regret the years before it when I confused endurance with love and silence with maturity. I regret every time I made myself smaller so other people could stay comfortable. But I do not regret the truth. The truth cost me a role. It gave me a life. That trade was worth it. The strangest part is this. For years, my mother acted like I was hard to love because I noticed too much. Sadie acted like I was dramatic because I remembered accurately. My father acted like I was difficult because I would not help bury everything forever. But the problem was never that I saw too much. The problem was that they needed me not to speak. And once I did, the whole machine broke. The last clear thing Nana ever said to me was in the hospital 2 days before she died. I had adjusted her blanket and was trying not to cry because she looked tired. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "You do not have to disappear to be loved." I did not understand it fully then. I do now. Belonging that has to be purchased with silence is not belonging. Love that only arrives when you're useful is not love. Family that survives by feeding on one person's self-erasure is not family. So no, I did not lose my family at my wedding. I lost a job. I lost the role of person who absorbed everything so everyone else could keep pretending. And in the place where that role used to be, I built a marriage, a business, and a life that finally feels like mine. Turns out Nana was right. The reward for showing up is not that unfair people become fair. It is that one day, if you keep choosing truth, you stop needing unfair people to explain your worth. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel difficult. I felt seen.